Evet. Şu an sahneye kim geliyor Burcucuğum?
Efendim Brad Johnson gelecek.
Ne iş yapıyor bu arkadaş?
Yani anlatayım mı?
Anlat.
Arkadaş falan diyorsunuz da böyle
Evet.
20 yıldan fazla siber suç dünyasının en merkez figürü olmuş kendisi. En fazla aranan siber suçluymuş, doğru mu? Ve aynı zamanda CIA kendisi için The Original Internet Godfather diyormuş.
Wow.
Çok havalı değil mi?
Havalı. Etkileniyor musun böyle adamlardan?
Bayağı.
Çünkü bazı kadınlar değil mi böyle crime adamlardan etkileniyor. Ben mesela önemsemiyorum da siz çevirme, bacım çevirme bunu. Abim cansın, abim baş tacısın. Baş tacısı, çağıralım Burcu.
Evet. Efendim, The Original Internet Godfather, Brad Johnson.
Hey friend, welcome. Stage is yours.
All right. Good morning. How is everyone? Let's back that up. That is my United States Most Wanted picture. Yeah, I was in Las Vegas, Nevada, the night before I'd stolen $160,000 from ATMs. Woke up the next morning, signed on to an illegal website named cartersmarket.com. There's my name, U.S. Most Wanted, beside of it. There are things in life known as aha moments. This was more of an ah! So I did what any normal person would do at that moment in time. I loaded up and I went to Disney World. Yeah, I really went to Disney World. Lasted about 6 weeks. Secret Service, they come and get me, arrest me, sent me to prison. Then I escaped from prison. So who am I? The United States Secret Service called me the original Internet Godfather. How do you get a title like that? 39 serious crimes having to do with refining modern cybercrime as we know it today. An escape from prison, a place on the United States Most Wanted list, and I built the first organized cybercrime community, ShadowCrew. ShadowCrew was a precursor to today's darknet markets and laid the foundation for the way modern cybercrime channels still operate today. Before ShadowCrew, if you were looking to be involved in cybercrime, if you were looking to buy personal information, credit cards, bank logins, malware tools, anything else like that, there really wasn't a structure or a platform to do that. There was an IRC message channel, a chat session, where you didn't really know who you were talking to, you couldn't gauge trust or anything else like that. ShadowCrew solved that problem. It gave a trust mechanism for criminals to use. Now criminals knew who exactly they could trust. Who had a skill level, who did not, who had proper products, which products were good compared to which ones were not, who was potentially a scam artist, because let's face it, everyone in that community is a criminal. So who was looking just to steal money from other criminals compared to who was not, who was potentially law enforcement, who was not. Some of the people that I worked with, the guy with the goatee. I'm missing a slide. The guy with the goatee. He started out as our forum techie. He goes on to be the largest credit card thief in history. His name, Albert Gonzalez, responsible for Heartland Payment Systems, TJ Maxx, Dave & Buster's. Steals 170 million credit card numbers, sentenced to 2 20-year prison sentences. The guy with the flag behind him, that is Dmitry Golubov. If you've ever wondered where modern credit card theft begins, it begins with him. He's a Ukrainian national. He saw the success we were having with Counterfeit Library and ShadowCrew. He gets an idea that perhaps people will buy credit card information. Turns out they will. He sets up a site called Carter Planet, ends up partnering with ShadowCrew. He's arrested in 2006, spends 6 weeks in a Ukrainian jail, at which point a politician comes up and says, hey, he's really not a bad guy. They let him out. He goes on to start his own political party called the Internet Party of the Ukraine, its platform to stomp out fraud. He's currently on Parliament, stands a chance of being the next president of the Ukraine. The guy in the black and white, that is Maxik, or Maxim, Turkish national. He worked with Albert Gonzalez on the Heartland Payment Systems breaches. He was arrested at an airport in Turkey. They got his laptop. On his laptop, he had TrueCrypt. The entire thing was encrypted. They looked at him and said, hey, we need the key to that. He was like, I'm not giving you the key to that. They're like, that's fine. We've got a place for you. They throw him in a Turkish jail for 11 days, at which point he promptly gives them the key, and at which point they promptly give him 30 years in prison. The guy in the orange, that is Max Butler. He's in the book. He's the protagonist of the book Kingpin. I'm also in that book. It's written by Kevin Poulsen as the antagonist. He stole 60 million credit cards, ends up with 18 years in prison. Recently, last week, while serving prison time, he was indicted for another 9 serious crimes. It looks like he's going to have another decade added to his prison sentence because of that. The three pictures there, that is Roman Vega. He is the first seller of credit card dumps. For those who don't know what a credit card dump is, on the back of your credit or debit card, that magnetic stripe, there are 3 data tracks on there. The first data track is the customer's name. Second data track is the card number and equal sign, 16-digit algorithm out beside of that. Third data track is called indiscriminate data. No one uses it. What's sold on criminal marketplaces is the second data track. Back then, those things were sold for roughly $30 US. Today, those things still sell for roughly $30 US. He ends up with 18 years in prison. Now, the way that ShadowCrew fell has not really been discussed a lot. We've had a lot of news reports about it, but just to clue you into that, ShadowCrew goes on to make the front cover of Forbes magazine, August 2004. October 26, 2004, the United States Secret Service arrests 33 people, 6 countries in 6 hours. I was the only higher up that got away. They picked me up a few months later, and they give me a job. What happened is the way that I avoided capture was that we had hacked in, or we had breached Secret Service's text messages, their SMS messages. We knew they were investigating us. At the same time, we started seeing IP addresses from law enforcement coming in. I was the head of the group at that point. I got worried about being charged with basically every single crime that was being committed in there. I decided to step out. At about the same time, Albert Gonzalez, using a thing or committing a crime called the CVV1 hack, gets arrested in New Jersey. And what the CVV1 hack was, it's called a hack, but it's really not. What happened is we were phishing information. We were getting card numbers and PINs. In order for you to encode those card numbers and cash them out at an ATM, you have to have track 2 data. You must have that 16-digit algorithm out beside of it. Come to find out, none of the banks in the United States had implemented the hash on that track 2 data. So you could take the first 16 digits of the card number, an equal sign, any 16 digits and cash out. To give you an idea how much money we were stealing at that point, up until we started the CVV1 breach, using card not present fraud, actually ordering goods, getting them shipped in and cashing those out, we were profiting per person $30,000 to $40,000 a month. Once we started the CVV1 hack, that became $30,000 to $40,000 per day per person. Albert is arrested in New Jersey, broad daylight, standing at an ATM for 40 minutes doing nothing but withdrawing money, stuffing it in a backpack. Meanwhile, a couple of New Jersey law enforcement officials are standing across the way. They happen to notice this guy, go over and ask him what's going on after 40 minutes, and he falls apart. Flips, goes to work for the Secret Service. By this point, I had already retired from ShadowCrew. Albert goes on to set up a VPN. The VPN is ran by the United States Secret Service. They capture all the data, drop addresses, identifiers, and arrest everyone October 26, 2004. If you're looking at motivations of cybercriminals, there's only 3: status, cash, ideology. We're starting to see more and more ideology as time goes by, but most of it, even today, back then it was all about cash. Even today, basically it's all about cash. Excuse me. The reason these forums, the reason these marketplaces, these darknet forums and marketplaces exist, have a lot to do with why, or the necessities of cybercrime. See, for cybercrime to be successful, 3 things have to take place. You have to be able to gather data, you have to be able to commit a crime, and you have to be able to cash out. The problem is that a criminal is not good in all 3 things. A criminal is good in 1 thing. Sometimes he's good in 2. It's very rare that he can do all 3 things. That's why these marketplaces and forums exist. They allow that one specific criminal to network with other criminals who are good in areas where he is not. One of the examples, Tesco, November 2016. On Alphabay. Alphabay at the time was the largest criminal network on the planet. It had 240,000 members. On Alphabay, a brand new member comes on. He posts 1 message. And that message says, hey, for the past year, I've been able to hit this bank for $1,000 a week, no flags. 2 weeks later, Tesco's hit for $2.5 million. Now, how did that happen? That first person, he has the information. He does not understand how to scale the crime up properly. He certainly doesn't understand how to cash it out. So he posts that. By him posting that, someone within that 240,000 member structure notices that post. He says to himself, hey, this guy's not embellishing. He's not bragging. It looks like he's just stating a fact. Let me go and talk to him. So he does. that second person knew exactly how to commit the crime. Now, if Alphabet were still up, and it was shut down July 5th of last year, if Alphabet were still alive today, you could actually track it from that point. That second person then goes and posts advertisements looking for employees. He says, send me your resumes, we're going to make a lot of money. He gets cashiers from the EU, the UK, Brazil, United States, cashes out to the tune of 2.5 million. It is that type of structure, that forum type structure, that marketplace structure that cyber criminals use that turns a $1,000 a week crime into a $2.5 million crime. And Tesco's kind of like this case study of how cybercrime works. There's several things that went wrong with Tesco. How did it actually happen? November 2015, FCI and Visa released a global warning to banks. And that warning says, hey, you banks need to watch out for criminals taking your card numbers, using an Android device, and signing up for these cardless payment apps on Android devices. Tesco ignores those warnings. At the same time, to try to figure out what the card numbers are, for a criminal to try to figure that out, it becomes pretty difficult to figure out that algorithm. The problem is that Tesco's card numbers were sequential. Sequential. So there wasn't really much to figure out. At the same time, Tesco started to see test runs of this specific type of crime. Tesco ignored those. Say one thing about cybercriminals. Cybercriminals are very good about testing things before they go full spiel into everything. That's what happened. Tesco ignored that until $2.5 million is stolen. Tesco shows how criminals cross borders and boundaries. A lot of the time, it's because of skill level or regional locks. When I was involved in cybercrime, Ukrainians simply could not cash out stolen credit card data in Ukraine. It was all shut down. They had to rely on sources outside of those borders. One of the things that Tesco also illustrates is that most cybercrime is not technically sophisticated. It's not. Cybercrime in general, most of it, cybercrime is not rocket science. We have this perception that most attackers out there are these upper-skilled, highly sophisticated computer hackers able to break into any type of computer system that they want to break into. Like, I got you! Not so much. Not so much. Those types of attackers are out there, but their numbers are very few. 98% of the cyber criminals out there, they're simply social engineers. They know what it takes to manipulate a person to give up access, information, data, cash, when the person usually shouldn't give that up. They understand human psychology almost at the drop of a hat. If you look at the way most crime happens, most cybercrime happens, how do breaches begin? 92% of every single breach begins with a phishing attack. 92% of every breach begins with a phishing attack. If you look at spear phishing is 86% successful. If you want to know why banks or how banks are compromised, that's one of the methods right there. What's another method? 41% of all routers have the default password. 41%. Cybercrime is not sophisticated. It's not complicated to breach your system when you fall for a phishing attack or when you don't change the default password on your router. Now, why does that happen? I like to say there's no patch for human stupidity. Now, that's a good line, and it's partially true. If you look at what happened with Tesco, that's stupidity. If you look at not changing the default password, that's just stupidity. But that's not the entire answer to this. Phishing is a form of social engineering. That criminal understands the technology enough to be able to defraud a person and get access, information, or cash from that person. That's not stupidity. It's still 86% successful, regardless of the amount of security awareness training that the person has received. Let's take a look at how some of this works. Right here is gollum@anglerfish.com to gollum@anglerfish.com. Can anyone see the difference between the two anglerfishes? If not, let's blow that up. There's the first one. There's the second one. Anyone see the difference there? The dot above the I. Does anyone know what that is? That's a Unicode domain. That is not an English alphabet I, but it registers just fine, has the security certificates, everything else. That small thing right there is the #1 way that business email compromise happens. That's it. That's not sophisticated. That's an attacker understanding that you're not going to notice if you're cycling through 200 emails on a daily basis, you're not going to notice that a dot is not above an I. That specifically is $12 billion worth of losses. That's an average of $7 million a day simply doing that for business email compromise. That's not sophisticated. Think of it like this. An attacker, a cybercriminal, has a toolbox. And in this toolbox, he has the highly sophisticated tools. He has the side SQL attacks, the server attacks, the shell attacks. He has all this. And he also has these social engineering attacks, the spoofing phone calls, the phishing emails. And he has something else. Do you want to know what the #1 tool is that a criminal has in that toolbox? It's you. You are the #1 tool that a criminal uses. He relies on you not following the rules, on you falling for these social engineering tricks, on you being easily manipulated. That's the #1 thing. How are banks compromised? The most recent one, tens of millions of dollars lost in Russian banks simply because people walked in, the attackers physically walked into the banks with USB drives, pretending to be someone they weren't, and they talked the bank officials into letting them plug in the USB drives. They knew they shouldn't, but it still happened because of social engineering. That is the power of compromising the human. You don't hack a computer, you hack the human behind the computer. How do you cash out? Well, let's use a word on money. Let's take a word about money laundering for a second. Bitcoin. You want another word? Cryptocurrency. That tends to be the way. When I was committing crime, I stole $160,000 a week for 10 months every year. I used to put $150,000 of that into a backpack. I would come home in South Carolina. I had a spare bedroom. I would open the door. I would throw the backpack in the bedroom. Then one day I wake up, open that bedroom door, and I've got a lot of backpacks. And I have to figure out how to launder all that money. Back then, it was setting up multiple bank accounts throughout. I had bank accounts in the United States, Canada, Mexico, the Caymans, the EU. Finally, it ended up in Estonia, of all places. I had to learn how to launder. As time has progressed, the tools for criminals to launder money have become much easier. Cryptocurrency is a great method to launder funds. It's excellent. Matter of fact, I can't think of much more you do with crypto other than that. So that's how you launder funds. The conclusion of all this, we are all screwed. It's over. You're done. Your information's out there. Maybe not. Maybe not. Just as cybercrime itself is not sophisticated, it's not complicated to commit these crimes. It's really not complicated to protect yourself or your company against these crimes either. There's a few things you can do. The first is to understand where you fit in the criminal spectrum of things, either as a consumer or a business, as a company. It's like this. If you have a company that makes money off of a product or service, a criminal can and will make money off that same product or service. It's important that you understand where you fit. What type of product or service do you have? Then design security around that. Think like a criminal. Too many times we have security awareness training that the training is simply for compliance. That's it. It's not really to do any good, but it's for compliance. We need everyone to make sure they pass these security awareness tests. It's important that we practice pen testing, that we look at things from a criminal perspective, that we think like a criminal. Stay different. Criminals are about, you know what, you want to know one of the big things that the good guys are bad at? Adapting. Adapting. Criminals are all about adapting. We don't have to ask permission. We don't have to wait on memos. We don't have to go through management. We don't worry about regulations or laws. We adapt on the fly almost immediately to any type of anomaly that might pop up. The good guys are slow about doing that. It's important that you adapt as quickly as possible. Finally, one of the big things that criminals do is they share information. They share information. It's all about networking and sharing the information they receive. If someone has an exploit, an idea on how to commit a crime, he is all about posting that information, of sharing that information with other people in the hopes that he can profit more by that. that exact same thing applies to the good guys as well. If the good guys would just simply get to where they share information about how breaches happen, about the types of attacks they're seeing, about the tools that are working against cyber criminals, share that among the community, at that point you really reduce cybercrime and fraud as a whole. That's pretty much it for the presentation. As I walk off the stage, I've not really talked a lot about the impact of cybercrime. And I want you guys to understand that. When I was committing crime, I did not care about my victims. I had convinced myself that I was not that bad of a guy. In truth, I was a despicable, just horrible person. I stole people's retirement accounts. People who were saving up for retirement, I stole that money. I stole people's money that were trying to raise their children, trying to provide a home for their children. That's the face of cybercrime. There's never anyone that's involved in cybercrime that ever has any redeeming features, ever. I was fortunate that I went to prison, and while there, I was able to turn my life around. But please understand that when you're talking about a cybercriminal, when you encounter these people, it's very important that you press charges, that you try to put these people in prison, because they are not good people. The only thing they do is they cause harm across the entire spectrum. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right.
Now I'm more impressed. Wow. You have a heart, by the way. Küçük bir hediyemiz olacak kendisine. Gökhan Bey'in de yardımıyla istiyoruz. Bugünün anısına, doğru mu? Buyurun efendim.
Efendim.
My friend. Good to have you. Huh?
Thank you.
Live.
Very nice, very nice.
Technology, man.
Technology. Thank you so much. Thank you.